You're listening to Conversations with Chanda, a podcast that unpacks the community's grittiest, most vexing problems, hosted by Chanda Smith Baker.
Karla, I am so excited to have you on Conversations with Chanda. I am absolutely thrilled. You are in an exciting period of your career and life, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Well, thank you, Chanda. I'm honored. I'm honored to be on your show. I mean, I hear you on the radio. I'm always like, how do you get on that show?
The question of the month, I feel like. So, one of the things that I love to do on this podcast is really just talk about leadership and leadership from like very real places. And right now is a tough time. But if you've been at it for a while, you've had other tough times, right? So I think that sometimes we polish it up so well that people don't really get a sense of what we have either had to wrestle with, either personally and professionally, sometimes both. Like the ways in which we have been able to figure out how to manage through it, or the ways that we wish we knew how to manage through it. And so I'd love to talk a bit about that, and then ultimately about what you're doing these days. But why don't you just introduce yourself, and then we'll jump into your leadership story.
All right, great. Well, thank you again for the invitation. Super excited and honored to be on your show. My name is Karla Henderson, and I am the new president and CEO of Project for Pride in Living, also known as PPL. We've been in existence over 50 years and was founded by Joe Savaggio, a former priest who used to protest the Vietnam War, and opened up a tool lending shop not far from our headquarters on Chicago and Franklin, which is a very interesting corner, so to speak. And then turned it over to Steve Kramer, who was our executive director. And then all this work was elevated by Paul Williams, my predecessor for 11 years, sat in this seat. So I am extremely honored, humbled, elated, all the words to be in this role. It's not a role that I came looking for. I like to say it found me. And a girlfriend of mine sent me this reading, New Year's Day. And she said, so many times we are looking for our blessings, but are we ready to receive them? And that, I was definitely ready to receive this blessing. And I view it as a blessing, and that I've been entrusted with this incredible asset of housing and workforce development, 200 staff, really a pillar in this community.
Let's talk about that for a second, because it's funny. One of the questions I get asked a lot, or I used to get asked a lot, was, where do you plan to be in 5 years? And I always really just did not like that question, right? Like I grew up, in church and a number of things. And I always just felt like I don't want to be so planful that I don't allow for things to emerge that are meant for me. Right. And I'm not knocking those that have the plan, because you still got to get ready. But But my question for you is around just being ready for what comes forward, and how do you actually balance that from how you see your life and the track you're on versus when things present themselves and you're like, oh, I didn't have that one in the plan.
Well, definitely. Thank you for that question. I have always lived my life as a journey and just kind of walked that path. I also believe in trusting your gut and your intuition. And, when things don't feel right, I'll be the first one to say, yeah, this isn't for me. And have walked away from other opportunities that people would say, well, why would you do that? And so this definitely was an opportunity that came to me. So I moved here about 4 years ago from Detroit. Now I have a sister that lives in the Twin Cities. So I've been coming to Minnesota for almost 4 decades. She's raised 4 kids here. My niece and nephews are very entrenched in Minneapolis. And during the pandemic, I had a lot of friends that were just making life-changing decisions, right? We learned that when you lose people or time, you can't get that back. And that's what COVID taught me firsthand in Detroit. Saw a lot of death, a lot of grief, friends, parents of friends that, we would they would talk to them the night before, and the next morning they were passed away. And saw this job open for the city of Bloomington, Minnesota, and I thought, well, I'm going to apply. And if I get the job, it's a sign for me to come to Minnesota to be closer to my sister and her family. And lo and behold, I got the job. Next thing I know, I was moving here. Sat at that position for 2.5 years when a recruiter came calling. And it wasn't the first recruiter that had called, but it was something about PPL, their mission. Paul Williams, a legend in this space. And I thought, wow, I should really just have that conversation. And the day I accepted the job, Paul told me he was retiring the end of 2024. That was not what I had expected. And so fast forward, started working here. And then I was here about 4 months when the same recruiter reached out and said that my name kept coming up in these spaces, and would I consider putting my name in the hat. Needed a moment to think about it, because when you're going for something like this, you got to be all in. You have to be ready to talk about yourself. You got to be ready to accept the challenge. And so I needed like a day just to think, that's not why I moved here. Knowing some of the significant challenges we're facing in affordable housing. I was over housing, so I had a clear line of sight into the challenges, but really just wanted to make sure, like, okay, you're going to put your name in there and you're going to have to work for this. And I did. Nothing was handed to me. They put me through the hiring committee, through, I felt like sometimes I was getting questioned more about my intent and how I was going to adjust in this role, but totally lived up to it, obviously, since I did get the position. So I think it's just being ready and open to what that possibility was and is for me and this organization, and knowing I could definitely come and have an impact right off the bat.
I also grew up with, parents that be like, don't be talking about your new shoes with your friends. Don't be telling people about whatever you're doing. Don't be bragging, all this stuff. And so you said, be ready to talk about yourself.
Yeah.
How important is that for people to be able to confidently talk about themselves as they are traveling through their own career journeys?
I think it's definitely a priority, particularly among Black women. If we don't advocate for ourselves, and I learned this from a good friend in Detroit, Portia Rover. She used to tell me, we got to take care of these younger Black sisters behind us, because if we don't, who will? There's really nobody. So we have to be confident in who we are and be able to talk about ourselves and share, sometimes not be as modest as our, other human beings, because just the systems are just not meant for us to succeed. And so if we're not shouting kind of like our message and our accomplishments, who will be? And so just learned early on, probably from my parents as well, that, you're just as good as anybody else. And we're going to pour into you, and your success is going to be the success of not only my success, but as we talked about earlier, my ancestors and my village that helped raise me. And so I feel like it's sometimes I owe it to others to talk about, yes, how I know I do good work. And that's the other thing. I've learned over the years in my career that good work will always show up. Nobody can take the good work that you do away from you. And, people may not want to give you credit down the road or say, there were other people involved, but most of the people know who were there, the contribution that you put into a project or a community. So I think that's important.
What has influenced your leadership the most?
Oh, the adversities. The adversities. Yes. Having, throughout my career, I've been fortunate that, I usually get to a organization and I'm promoted quickly. And I'm not saying that just to boast, but I just know that. But with that comes a lot of other baggage, so to speak. And coming from a city like Detroit's, we kind of, use an analogy that, we got a lot of haters in Detroit, and people don't like to see, people successfully climb. And, so you're kind of always looking like, okay, who's rooting for me for real and who's not. And, you get to a point as you get to a certain age where you're like, well, that doesn't matter. My work is what matters. And so just being unapologetically myself. And I will tell you, moving to Minnesota 4 years ago, I have probably talked about being a Black woman more in the 4 years that I've lived here than in my whole lifetime. Probably because of the time I got here in 2021, but it was like, we need to talk about how it is, how are you feeling as a Black woman, and this and that. And I was like, I come from a city that, it's Black, I'm Black, I'm Black. Like, it's like, we're all Black. So we don't really talk about like, how do you feel to be a Black person? Because your friends are Black, everybody's Black. And so that was a little bit of an adjustment for me, but one that I kind of appreciated, that I was able to have an open dialogue with colleagues and friends and people that I was getting to know about my experiences just in the last 4 years being here in Minnesota as well.
What is it like leading while being a Black woman?
Yeah, it is. You really have to be comfortable with yourself, and you have to know yourself, and you have to know, and you have to just be reassured, I think. And I think that there's so many of our young people, when I look at like these younger Black women, I mean, they're fierce. I mean, I'm scared. I'm like, I was working with some women in Bloomington, and then one of them turned 40, and I said, I'm scared for us, because I already know what you are like as a 30-year-old, and I just know what's going to happen to you when you're 40 and you are more confident. And so I love supporting younger Black women, and I love seeing them excel. And so, yeah, I do love being a Black woman. I mean, I've been it all my life, so of course.
Yeah. And I think that because, the listening audience obviously is more expansive than Black folks. There are things that we experience in leadership space that cause us pause, but we often have to act as though it did not.
Yes.
And I wonder if you have an example that you could share, because I think part of what this is to make sure that we're all learning and expanding and understanding what other people's experiences are. So I don't know if you have anything that can make it concrete for folks of things maybe that you've had to navigate, where you're like, man, I know other people don't have to go through this like this.
Yes, definitely. When I worked for the city of Ann Arbor, Michigan, I worked there 9 years. I was promoted 3 times, and my last position was over what we would consider public works department. So it was all the men and women who maintain the infrastructure. It's a very male-dominated field, but from everywhere from who's fixing the water main breaks to plowing the snow to picking up the trash to cutting the grass. And we would go to these conferences where you walk through the halls, and I would be there mostly with my male supervisors. And, we'd be looking at a piece of equipment, let's say a Vector truck. That's a probably $250,000 to $300,000 cost. And we'd be talking to the manufacturer about it. And that sales rep would always defer to my supervisors, right? Kind of overlooking at me. And so, I learned, yes, I could have been like, hey, I'm in charge here, but I didn't. But I was around great folks that would say, she's the one that's got the checkbook. She's the one that's going to make the decision. So you might want to make sure she's looped into this conversation. And so, sometimes just giving people grace to, I'm not interested in embarrassing anybody or having anybody feel like what their assumptions are, but that I was around a good team of folks that would say, yeah, you really need to include Karla in this conversation as well.
I remember I had a person like that I worked with, and I would encounter. And when I would meet with him, he would always look at my team. And, after a couple exchanges, I would always stand up behind my seat. I would just get up and stand up just for a few minutes. Because I'm like, let me give him a signal to just redirect some of that energy. And then I would sit back down. And I remember some younger Black women asked me why I did that. And I said, because he's not acknowledging my role, but I'm acknowledging my role with him. And sometimes you don't have to be loud to make the shifts. You can see it and you can still offer grace. You can still be intentional. So, yeah, I appreciate that one.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
How have you defined success? Because it's one thing to sort of achieve it. And especially when other people identify it in promotion and other things. But do you have sort of your own indicators of what success means to you in your roles?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And that was actually one of the questions I got asked during my interview process for this
Oh, wow.
role. And I talked about that any work that I do, when I leave that community, that I've left it in a better spot than when I got there. And that can mean going back to Detroit. I worked for the mayor from 2009 to 2013. And there are projects that I can drive down the street and go, oh, I remember we put that financing together for that. Or oh, I remember we helped this entrepreneur purchase this property. And that is the success for me. Like I know the work I was able to do in Bloomington was trying to come up with some innovative programs. We did an internship. I just thought this is, a lot of the youth here don't know about these government jobs, and these are public sector jobs are some of the best jobs, and really wanting the youth to, I remember going to the high schools and the kids would say, nah, we're not into politics. We don't want to come work for the city. And I said, it's not about running for a public office. This is about some great opportunities with great benefits that will pay for you to go back and get your degree. And so we started internship there. And so really just opening opportunity for those who have just been left out is important as well.
It is. You are following in your role. You mentioned a number of great leaders, but most recently, Paul Williams, who is a beloved leader.
Yes.
It is very different taking a role from a beloved leader than one that everybody want to go. We ready for this. Right. It's really, really different. Talk to me about Paul and how this transition has been for you.
So Paul is the main reason why I joined PPL, as I mentioned earlier. He is the epitome of servant leadership. I mean, he has given, 40 plus years to the struggle as he talks about it. And he has been just an incredible mentor and supporter. Like we're still meeting, checking in every week. And I save up all my questions till that the end of the week so that I can kind of say, hey, what's going on with this, and get his input. But the other thing I appreciate about Paul is that he's really letting me lean into this role as I see fit. And, he's kind of like that parent, like, I'm going to be here in case you need me. This is very interesting because, day one, I wanted to make all these changes and I was talking to him about it and he shared his views, but he clearly was like, but this is up to you. This is your decision to make. And so I'm just really, really grateful for that. The day, even though we all knew that he was going to announce his retirement in May. Like we all knew, I found out when I got here. And the day it was happening, we had a leadership meeting. And, what I appreciated is he started to talk about that it was time for him to step down for a couple of reasons. He said he didn't believe in that, that you should be a leader of an organization and consume it. You need to let new fresh ideas come in. He had been here 11 years. He felt that PPL was very fortunate in 2023 to get a number of one-time donations, including a grant from McKinsey Scott that really put a 5-year plan together that he and the executive team had put together. So financially, we're in pretty good standing. We have our challenges just like all nonprofits, but right now we seem to be in a pretty good space. And the other thing he talked about was, he has not taken care of himself like he should. And as you get older and you start to mature, those are the things that are going to matter. Like I'm sure, he's got his kids and, wants to be here. So he's putting himself first, which I appreciate for him. And the transition has been great. In the beginning, I wasn't, it was like, I wasn't sure how things were going to go. But he has been nothing but supportive. The hiring committee didn't have him as part of the selection process, so he stayed on the outside of it. But one of the things I've heard him say publicly, he said at his retirement or his going away party, was that it was a unanimous decision to hire Karla, and she beat the best of the best. And this process, I will say, was so confidential. I have no idea who my competition was, and it's probably best that that's how it went.
And as it should be.
Yes,
they should
as it should be. But he said, there were some heavy hitters in that pool, and the fact that I was selected, know that it wasn't me coming, because some people thought, oh, well, she just got there, this was the heir apparent, and so, oh no, that is not what happened at all. And he's told me it's very important that people know that you earned that role and you earned that seat, which I just so appreciate.
Yeah, it's funny because you're bringing me back. So I was the president and CEO of Pillsbury United Communities, and I was internal, but I went through a national search. So when, now all searches are essentially national. Once you post it on the internet, right? Like it was then, but we didn't talk about it that way. And so people thought that I just got appointed or I just knew. And I had never spoken with anyone internal about being in that role. And I competed for that role. Like I remember the day before interviews, taking the day off.
Wow.
And just studying an organization that I had been in for 10 years, studying and thinking through how I wanted to frame it. How do I teach people that know me new things about how I lead? You work for them roles.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There was no easy. And I what I appreciate about the process as well is the hiring committee with 6 board members had very intentional questions for me as an internal candidate. What is it going to be like if I get this role to go from my peers to now, having certain individuals reporting to me? What was I going to do in terms of my role, my position? And, I had to give a lot of thought to those kind of questions. And I remember saying at one point, I wasn't so sure I was going to backfill my role because I wanted to do some reorganization and I wanted to save some money. And I said, but I can't even get there yet because I don't have the position. And so I felt like I can't start doing the org chart because I don't even know I'm going to be the CEO. So hold back,
right.
So you just got to take one step at a time. But I had to tell them that's what I'm thinking, but I can't even focus on that because I got to get through these conversations first.
There's a lot of people that will be listening that sit on boards. And, I have sat on a lot of boards, and succession is always sort of not at the top of the agenda, right? Like I have things around that, nurturing the pipeline of talent within an organization. But from outside appearances, and obviously from what you're sharing, this has been a pretty seamless transition of leadership. What advice would you have for people that are sitting in governance seats about how to support seamless transitions, planned or unplanned? What would you want them to consider?
Oh, gosh, that's an excellent question. I would want them to consider the person coming on is going to need support, unconditionally in the beginning definitely, because it's definitely a transition. Whether I was internal or external, you're coming into a new organization or a new position. And I have felt that, and I'm very grateful for that. Like, I do not take that lightly, that the board has said to me, we are here, we got your back. That's what my incoming board chair, said a couple of weeks ago. How are you going to support Karla, have her back during this transition? I also think it's important that, sometimes to have that overlap, as valuable as it can be, there are times when it does not, it's not the best interest of all parties. And so, I was fortunate that Paul is going to be here for 6 months, but have been told that, if there's at a point where that was something the board wanted to do as an option for me, but that if there's, a point where I don't see it's needed, or maybe he can, he's going to do some policy work because he has such a loud voice at the Capitol. And so that's the work he loves, right? And so he's going to continue to do that work as well as checking in with me. But as far as the day-to-day operations, he's definitely not involved in that. And I think that that's important as well, so that there's a kind of a clear, some boundaries on, so that people don't feel like, are there two CEOs still, or who do I go to? And, that kind of thing. So I think that's important.
What did you have to adjust or anything moving from one role to the other? So now you were in the organization, you've had to adjust. You talked about moving the team. Were there anything in mindset or other things that you needed to think about as you moved into the role? There are a lot of people that are, moving from not being a manager to being a supervisor to a director, all of these moments of leadership that people move through. But was there anything in your mindset that you had to shift?
Yeah, there's two things that come to mind. The first thing is just something that I believe in as leaders is, how you show up matters, right? And so I have to show up here every day and sometimes be the motivator, right? When we're working with some very challenged populations. And so it's very important that I have a positive outlook and that I exhibit that, because, I used to joke, like, if I come in and I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Who knows? This is so hard. Then that's what everybody in the organization is going to feel. So it's very important that you show up as the leader and as you're, basically moving the organization forward. The other thing, people say it's lonely at the top, and you do have to find people outside of the organization that you can confide in and talk to, because, there's a lot of things that are going on, and you just can't, you have to redefine some of your relationships with some of your peers that you had, maybe a friendship prior. Now you're in this leadership role. And so some things are just not appropriate to talk about. And so you have to learn to get yourself a group of other leaders that you can trust.
Yeah. So every day I get asked, how do you feel right now with what's happening? Right. And I'm always like, what is happening? Right. Like, so I have sort of two responses. One is that it is the same America. This is not the worst of times. It is not a great time, but it's not the worst of times that we have seen. Certainly there's a lot of challenges, but that I just can't lead from that emotion. And I know there's a lot of people that are really, really challenged and struggling through what is happening to our nation, our democracy, big disappointments on who we thought this country was, what we thought, the protections we thought would move forward. So for those leaders because this is a really important lesson, it is about your transition, but it also is about a position of leadership. And it can be very challenging to strike both being real and not moving people's feelings aside, and also being that chief motivator. So, for those folks that are people managers, or leading organizations, what should we be doing right now? Because it is heavy.
It is so heavy. The day after the election, we allowed staff to get together in a space to talk about their feelings. And it was mostly staff of color that came together, and everything from how they were treated at the polls, out in the suburbs, and just all just treated very disrespectfully, how they felt, what was happening, what was going to happen. We're talking like the day after the election. And just allowing people to have that space. However, I sat here with our executive team one day, and that's been a question that's come up, like, what's PPL going to do? And I said, we were founded by a former who left the priesthood to start PPL, who was protesting the Vietnam War. Like, we were founded under protest, right? Like, our organization was founded. Our founder did not shy away from these hard times, and we cannot either. Because at the end of the day, the people that we provide service to or house or train, some of this, Paul said it the day after the election. He said, our residents and our students, it's the same America that they went to bed with, that they woke up to. Now, we probably did not realize that some of this stuff is like, freezing federal funds and that kind of thing. But I just think it's a lot of noise and chaos. And so we like to say we're going to focus on the things that we can control until there are things that we can't control. And that is definitely the message we've been saying to staff, even our board. We have board members that were concerned, and it's like, yeah, 10% of our funding is federal funds. And, we're aware of it, but until we get to the point where those funds are gone or in jeopardy, or we're told they're gone, there's so many executive orders and chaos that's happening, that it does not do us any good as the Norway House is right down the street. And I went to meet with them last year, and they said, Karla, we're the anchors of the community. And I had never, it just spoke to me. So if we're like, oh my goodness, and we're the anchor, we've got to be ready to stand strong for people in community that perhaps don't have a voice.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing too, around the lesson is that, you can preempt what's happening and start making decisions. You can concentrate on what you're anticipating. You can go chase the problem, or you could be anchored and stay consistent in your strategy, your mission, your vision, and value, and have good strategy in how you respond if it hits you. Is what I'm sort of hearing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Say a bit more about PPL. So you've mentioned housing and training and some of the history, but what else should people know about this organization and how you're approaching the work?
People should know that we run 2 alternative high schools for the Minneapolis Public Schools. That was something I completely did not realize, that we have a program called LEAP, where we take we work with youth that are 14 to 24 that have had some type of, I don't call it interaction, but some type of, it might be interaction with either the foster care system, they're highly mobile, people experiencing homelessness, or the juvenile justice system. And we have 23 partners and service 500 youth through all kinds of supportive services, apprenticeship programs. One of the things that just blew my mind is and our LEAP staff is phenomenal. They found a glass blowing organization that was interested in teaching our young people how to blow glass. And these young folks have been going to 2 conferences, and then got connected with a gentleman from Venice who has youth from all over the world come to Venice to learn Venetian glass blowing. So 4 of our youth will travel to Venice this summer and learn about Venetian glass blowing. And I'm just like, how awesome is that? Like, you talk about life-changing, experiences that are happening here every day. So yeah, we're known definitely as being an affordable housing owner, operator, developer, for sure. We do workforce development. I sometimes think the programming we're doing with the young people, it's overlooked a little bit. And
Yeah.
I really want to elevate that work and the work that's being done at PPL with our young people. It's so important.
I love that. I've been, around long enough now and I ran a multi-service organization where you're like, and we do this, and we have a grocery store, and there's a theater, and there's a daycare, right? Like, and. And then people sort of look like, are you trying to boil the ocean? Like, help me understand.
Right.
And those are the type of organizations that I love, like this holistic, and the same people tend to understand a wraparound services.
Yes.
But how do you describe sort of a multi-service organization to folks that maybe are just like, can't you just do one thing great?
Yeah.
And I always feel like we do one thing great, right? We serve this community. Right. That's what's great. But tell me how you look at that.
So that's an excellent point and question. One of the things we thought we should narrow down is kind of what is our theme? What do we say we do? We have we build hopes and assets and self-reliance, but that even gets a little So one of the things we came up with, which we'll be rolling out soon, is we're going to say we offer a place to live and a path to thrive. And those are just two that, like, some place to live, and then you can thrive, whatever that may mean for you. That may mean, I want to the apprenticeship program. I want to get my my diploma from one of our schools. I want to become a lobotomist at one of the hospitals. Thriving, or it just may mean I've got a home now and I can thrive in this home. So we don't want to define exactly what thrive means, but definitely a place to live. That's a big part of what we do. And then also a path, giving folks a path to thrive.
Mm-hmm. I think the other thing I run up against that I'm curious on what you think is that when people are seeking change in community, and I imagine it's probably more dominant here, we want to seek fast and simple solutions to really complex challenges. And it's like they're hungry, give them food, right? They're homeless, give them a house. But we may not understand what the barrier to actually successfully accessing those things are. How do you sort of strategize around sort of the knee-jerk, quick response, simple solution ways that sometimes we approach working with people, particularly folks of color in community?
Yeah, that is a great question. I would say that we're going to meet people where they are, and then be patient. Not everybody, and this, we don't approach the work as saviorism as well. That is not, folks have resilience already in them. For us, it's more, how do we provide a vehicle or a pathway for them? And that can take years. So we're not on anybody's timeline. Yes, I know that, when you talk to funders and, they want to look at your metrics and how many people, things we're measuring is, did a family stay with us longer than 2 years? Because that is an indicator that's a stable indicator for a household. 2 years, that's a long time, right? Like, there's a lot of things that could happen within 2 years to that family or that individual, but that is a metrics. And so we're here for I don't want to say the slow and steady race, but we're here to be that consistent anchor, where folks know that they can come to us for that assistance.
Yeah, and I hear that. And part of what I also hear in it is that it takes time to build trust. I hear that you're working with whole families,
Yes.
Versus programming one person in a family.
Right.
And that anchor institutions are there when you need them. And so, every path, every leadership path, every life has moments where you have, where you thought you was moving forward and something hits and you're like, dang, one step forward, 4 steps back, right? And this happens to all of us, including folks that are less resourced.
I will tell you a quick story that happened right before I joined. I came to visit Paul because I was doing check-ins with him. It was the day after, this was in 2024, the day after the Martin Luther King Jr. Holiday. And I met Paul at the door, and we had been broken in. Well, actually, we hadn't been broken into. Our door had not shut to where the latch locked it, right? So nobody broke our door. And somebody must have come along and opened that door and came in, and, it was, people were mulling around to see what had been taken. And the only thing that had been taken was some food and some diapers. Now, we had our equipment down there, gift cards that we gave out, all kinds of things. The only thing, and I remember that's when I knew, like, I'm at the right place, because Paul said that's all they took. They knew that they could come here, and we were closed, and they opened the door, still got in, and took what they needed and left. I mean, that's what makes PPL so different, in my opinion, is that community knows they can come here to us. And, we were like, I hope they got what they needed,
That's right. Right. Yeah. And people respect where they get respected.
That's absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. We're in a moment where there's a lot of energy around the reversal of diversity, equity, inclusion language. I sit in all parts of my body on this particular issue. I care more about action than language, but I also understand the danger of what is happening. But how are you thinking through this as a leader? You don't necessarily have to talk specifically about PPL if you don't want to, but how are you thinking about, how do you continue to approach racial justice work when there's so much alarm? Because, unfortunately, this is extended beyond Washington, D.C.
Right.
Right. And I don't know if it's a value of people. I don't know. I do know, but I don't know. But how are you thinking through that?
Well, for me, it's important that I remember that, my predecessor, Paul Williams, who we talked about, put race equity at the forefront of this organization. And those were the things that spoke to me when I got here. We have an employee handbook, and it's like the cover, the table of contents, the welcome letter, and then it's our statement, our commitment to race equity. And we know that we have gotten anonymous donations because of our work in that space, because we have not shied away from it. And that's who we are. And I think it would be, I know you said you didn't have to talk about PPL, but it's so important that,
wherever you want to take it.
Folks understand, or the listeners understand that, that is in the foundation of how this organization was built. And, we can't shy away from it. We just can't. It's very important. Now, the DEI, I hear what you're saying, and I have lots of friends that say we should never call it DEI. Just do the work. It doesn't matter what it's called. But I also hear what you're saying, that, sometimes the people, I just think about the young folks that are hearing all of this chatter about, oh, we're going to, erase this or do that. Like, it's just, these are real human beings. I got my birth certificate mailed to me, and I called my sister, and I was just shocked because it had my parents listed as Negro. And so I was like, wow, they had mom and dad listening. My sister kind of joked, like, we're going back there. We will be going back there. Like, it's just like,
so my birth certificate lists me as Negro.
Okay. See?
And I don't know why that hits me in the way that it does when I see it, but it does hit me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my point is, think about all the folks younger than us that are now hearing, how you identify, you can't identify like that anymore, or who you think you are. We're going to tell you there's only two sexes. And I mean, just like where people are struggling anyway, or some people are, I should say, that now we're just going to add that on. It's beyond unfortunate. And that's why, the work just matters so much more. It really does.
Yeah. I've been in a couple of situations that have been tough because I'm part of organizations and that receive a lot of funding. And so the language is not just about the language, it's about survival.
Yes.
And there's plenty to navigate. But what I do hear you saying is for organizations that have centered race equity, it's sort of a time to double down on your value.
Yeah.
Right. You have to sort of do what you need to do for business, but you got to double down. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We went to meet another nonprofit in the Twin Cities, our chief people officer and myself. And when we got there, this woman said, we've had to cleanse our website. Now think about the word she used, cleanse.
I know. I
mean, really? And and then we get an email, oh yeah, HUD or whomever, Dodge is looking at websites to see who's got, certain things on there. And I was like, oh, get out of survival, right? Like you're trying to keep your doors open and you're trying to keep your funding. But that was what she said to us. And I just kind of was like, wow, that we're cleansing now our websites. Yeah.
And I think that's what we think we're doing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you led through a time like this before?
No, I don't think like this. I don't think like this. No.
And so, all leaders get to a point where you're like, man, I've never had to do this before. I got all these people looking at me, asking me questions. I ain't seen this either. Y'all ain't seen this. I haven't seen it either.
Exactly.
So when you're in a leadership role and you confront things that you've never seen before, what do you rely on?
I definitely have to rely on really my intellect and my confidence. I was giving I had to do this kind of like fireside chat with the staff. They wanted to get to know me, even though people knew me, and so I spent a good 45 minutes talking about who I was, how I got here, how I got to Minnesota, how I got to PPL. And I was asked that question, like with everything going on, and it was like, I thought it was going to be a question about me, right? So I was like, oh, yes, I can take questions. Sure. I thought they would say, well, why did you major this in college? Oh, well, let me tell you. And they said, well, this is kind of off topic. What is your perspective, or what are we going to do? Basically, what are we going to do with all that's going on? And I said, we're going to continue to serve the community we serve. And we're going to have to double down on some of our efforts. We know that. And I want everybody to know that here. And so people were like, oh, okay. Because I was like, you're right, Chandra. I was like, what are we going to do? Oh, you're asking me? Oh, well, let me tell you what we're going to do. And and I think people appreciate that because that's what leadership is, right? It's when you're making tough, sometimes making decisions that are centered on your vision and your values and your objectives and your foundation, which is what I feel like I've been entrusted to do with this organization. I can't go running away now. We had a one page. We were working on internally with a one pager to send to our donors, and there was a committee that kind of talked about, well, maybe we should take race equity out, and this, and we were all like, no. It stays. It stays.
Mm-hmm.
That's who we are. And so just being true to your mission and your values is yeah.
A certain amount of clarity.
Yes.
So I missed what I understand was the party of the year. I had a conflict.
Your son and sister were there.
I know. I hated to miss it. And I had an obligation that I just could not navigate it around. And had it been anyone else, I probably would have not gone. But it was my oldest son had something that he was doing in community, and I just had to show up for him.
Oh, totally get it.
Yeah.
We're going to do another one. So many people were so excited about it, including my incoming chair, that he's like, we really need to think about doing something similar that's authentic with community, because I wanted a celebration, not because of me. I felt like we all need to come and celebrate and have a good time, have some music and good food and some libations and all of that. Because I was just like, if we cannot take a moment and celebrate ourselves, then we should all go home. We got to celebrate. And I was leaving that day, and one of the staff people I work with, Gurmai, was complaining. He was worried about an inspection he had the next day. He said, I got this 6 units I got to get inspected. I said, Gurmai, don't bring that energy tonight. Do not bring that. Like, I don't want any, you leave that at the door. We will pick up on Friday. I think everybody had a good time.
Yeah, so celebrating your leadership coming in. And I think that, part of what I think is super important, we've talked about this before on the podcast, is that you can have tough times and still laugh and have fun. There's more than one truth in a moment, right?
I love that. Yes.
And it just reminded me of some things like that, or times back earlier in my year where new leaders would come in and there would be this moment of, we're here to support you, like community coming in and say, we got you. Like your board chair said, like the community said, we got you as you came in a moment of celebration of the legacy of PPL and an acknowledgement that it's your time to lead. So what an incredible blessing for you. I'm really excited. And again, I just know my heart was there.
Okay.
And then I saw the pictures and I was like,
Yeah, it was, we had, Paul was so fun. So Paul was there. He sat right behind me and I could hear him as speakers were speaking. And then after, it was just so many people, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him. And he would say, you want me in that picture? And I said, yeah, come on. And then he wouldn't come over. So I saw him the next week and he said, now I can get, I couldn't even
now you
get
got time for me.
Yeah, now you got time. And I said, I'm sorry. He goes, yeah, I never had walk-up music, because that was one of the things I just love. And it was so funny. I was talking to the team and I was ask people what they want their walk-up song to be. And one guy, Bill Griffith from Larkin Hoffman, he's a grandfather. He was like, I asked my kids and they were like, Dad, you're not cool enough to have walk-up music. So people really got into that whole spirit. But Paul he's so generous. He said, I looked around that room and I saw all these young people and all these young people of color. And I was like, this is why I retired. Because, I could, he's like, I knew I needed to pass the baton. And I am
infusion of
grateful.
New energy, right? Sometimes we just need it. It's not about whether or not it's time to go. Sometimes organizations just need new energy. What was your walk-up song?
I'm Coming Out by Diana Ross.
As we wrap, you mentioned that you saw my sister and my son. So, anytime I hear their names come up, I just have to say, like, it is like to be in the work in the same field as them. And I tell them both that throughout the day, I almost know all of their meetings. And I'm sure they know mine because people are constantly texting me. They for sure send me pictures of my son. Malik, that be 3, but
he's amazing. Like I keep saying, you should be super proud. I mean, I'm a fan club member, and I'm like, listen, whatever he needs, because the day I met him was on one of those first inner city leadership visit trips in 2021. We were going to a date, and that's when I met Paul too, going to Charlotte, and I was like, who is this young, articulate young man, just with mayors and CEOs and holding his space right there with him. I was like, oh, I love that. I love that.
I guess I have my last question was, or the last statement I'll make since we're talking about him and, he's in his 20s, he's in this role, he's out there, and that leadership can show up at any age. And it is about, like what you said, is just being really clear, the consistency, how you show up, how you follow up, and being clear about what you want to communicate. And I think he's really got that down.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Yeah.
So Karla, as we get ready to wrap this conversation, do you have anything that is upcoming that's exciting that you would like the listening audience to know?
Yes, and for everyone in the Twin Cities region, PPL, Project for Prime Living, will be hosting their annual breakfast. It is Thursday, May 8th, 7 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. at the Depot. There is no cost to attend. We just want people to come and learn about our work. Of course, there'll be an ask at the end of the breakfast, but you're not obligated to give. And so more information on our website. But just invite anybody who would like to learn more about PPL. That's an opportunity for them. Our website is www.ppl-inc.org.
Awesome. I am so glad you are here. You are definitely bringing the energy and light during some dark and interesting times. I think that you've been a demonstration in this conversation and in your career of that. While things might be going backwards, there's places where things are still moving forward. And it's important to remember that as we try to balance our energy, that there are new leaders emerging. There are new leaders coming into new roles. There's new programs being launched. There's so much joy to have in the middle of what is a dark and interesting time. So thank you for being that light. Thank you for being on Conversations with Chanda. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. And I have to tell you, you were one of the first people I was like, I got to get to know this woman because your legacy, the work you've done in community is well known. Didn't even know you, had never met you till this past summer. So thank you for leading the way as well.
If you'd like to explore more content and join our community, find us at conversationswithchanda.com. We have a wonderful collection of episodes featuring notable guests that you can enjoy on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast.